Hi everyone, thanks for checking out another Broken Meeple video. This is previewing / reviewing, it's kind of a mixture of both, Divinus from Lucky Duck Games. This is a Kickstarter impending. At the end of this month they're going to be launching it and it's going to release at some point next year. And this is kind of, it's a standalone game in its own right, but it's drawing on a lot of aspects that Destinies had recently. A competitive, hybrid, like app-driven game, story-driven, but in this case, legacy. In the other one, you played through the scenario, and that was kind of it. You had 3 different paths to go down, but once you did the scenario, that was kind of it. Nothing new really happened, especially for the next scenario, so they were kind of independent, but with Divinus, it's the idea that when you play through Scenario 1, the legacy aspects will carry over into Scenario 2 and 3 and 4 all the way up to, I believe, 12 scenarios that this is going to do. Now, I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but bear in mind, they've only given us a prototype that works with 2 scenarios. So we've played the first 2 scenarios out of 12, so we don't know what's going on with the later part of the game. All we know is what it tells us now. So I'm going to try and keep it relatively spoiler-free in terms of story, but mechanics, I want to go over them in a little bit of detail, not too much, but you know, enough to kind of give you an idea of, is this the game for you? And I'll give you my honest thoughts as to what I thought from the first 2 games. So what you end up is pretty much what this is in the box. Now, this is all prototype. So the art is pretty good and for the most part final, but I'm not going to comment on how pretty it looks or how good the components are, other than the fact that it does look pretty, okay? So basically you are taking on the role of a demigod and you are influencing what happens with essentially what is going on between these other gods and the humans of the world in order to set yourself up as, right, I'm going to be the next god in charge, you know, by the time this is all over. So to start with, you get your box with your chosen demigod, 2 male, 2 female, you name it, and other than that, all it's got is a bunch of dice. Nothing much there. So you start off with 6 pretty good chunky dice with the typical font lettering and that, but it's all basically numbers from 1 to 6, and 1 single sticker with 3/6 on it. It basically allows you to customize these dice as the game goes on. That's it. That's all you get. It throws you pretty much into a blank slate from the get-go. Now, the rulebook, from what we got here, is obviously not final, but we didn't have too much trouble understanding the game from this. It's a relatively simple game, the setup's done, good pictorial examples. There were a few bits that we thought were omitted, but we had an FAQ that was sorting that out, so that wasn't too bad. But there were 1 or 2 other parts where I thought it was missing 1 or 2 key rules, but we'll get onto that later. But you can be reading this and up and running in the space of 10 minutes. It's really simple, not quite Destinies level simple. If you think that that's like ultra simple, this is the step above that. But this is in no way like complex or, you know, like only for heavy gamers or anything. You know, families should be able to get into this as well. So in the first scenario, pretty much all you do is build a map. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You get a bit of story on the app and it takes you through, and be prepared for a lot of reading. There is quite a lot of reading in this app. But you'll get the story and it will say like, oh, you know, you are this and I am Gaia and I am Mother, go Captain Planet, whatever.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet!
What you'll do is there's a bunch of these tiles, different map tiles, and it gives you a very sort of Carcassonne Isle of Skye-esque feeling, probably closer to Isle of Skye actually, because you've got terrain types like in weird segments across them. But basically a bunch of these tiles will be laid out on the board, and what I'll try and pull the board back a little bit so you can see it, but essentially what will happen is these will be laid out, you'll roll your dice, and then what you do is that each square is numbered from 1 to 12, and you use your dice in any combination you can think of to grab a tile. So a 6 and a 4 here, I can go grab this 10 tile. And you put it in front of you, and you create your own little Carcassonne map. It goes on until you've got 16 in front of you, and then the scenario ends. During that time, you are trying to fulfill some quests, which you get in your little box saying like, oh, it's scenario 1, open this box and see the little goodies inside. Something I always like, because you get something new. But you have to fulfill quests, and they typically relate to getting icons on your map grid in front of you. And you've got Greek symbols and Viking symbols and barbarian symbols to begin with, but who knows what will happen in future scenarios. And so that's essentially all you do in the first game. And I gotta admit, if I was just playing the first game on its own, I would be saying,
What the hell is that?
okay, is this it? That seems pretty lame. I'm glad they gave us a 2-scenario prototype of this, because things kick up quite a notch in scenario 2 compared to the first one. The first one is basically just trying to teach you the fundamental game rule, which is you're trying to get these quests. This is what you do on the app when you fulfill the quest. It gives you a little bit of story, like sort of signs you on to some plot development for later. But pretty much all the first scenario is okay, 10, 9, 1, 5, rest, reroll the dice, 7, 2, 10, and that's all you do, and you just build up your grid so that the terrain pieces match. So grass has got to match to grass, and mountain to mountain, river to river. And like I say, scenario 1 really doesn't get you that interested in the game, but I'm going to tell you this now, stick with it. Stick with it into scenario 2, because it almost, I feel, should give you a bit more in scenario 1 to tease you in, because when you start scenario 2, wow, you've got an envelope here full of stuff and stickers that you do, a bit like Pandemic Legacy, and at the start of scenario 2, I thought this scenario was only meant to take about 45 minutes to an hour. I feel like we're going to take 45 minutes to an hour just to get the intro, like, stickers and that all out. Yeah, it does throw quite a bit at you, but in a good way. So in terms of scenario legacy style, basically as you're going through the first couple of scenarios, as already mentioned in the blurb, you've got Greeks and Vikings going at each other's throats. Depending on what icons you get on your tiles, that kind of dictates from the story perspective which side you're allying with. Am I siding with the Greeks? Am I siding with the Vikings? Or maybe I'm just taking a neutral stance and protecting Mother Earth and going with the barbarians. Entirely up to you. But the app will remember this, and you'll be able to check your standing with particular sides and gods on a kind of like a little scoreboard. So it will say like, oh, I've got so many of a red gem symbol, like victory point or whatever, which means that Gaia loves me, but then I've got next to none of the blue ones, which means I'm not particularly good with the Norse gods, and so this will influence story aspects. As well as that, you've got little stickers that you'll put on the tiles themselves to represent locations, and the idea is that normally in Chronicles of Crime and that they use those QR codes. Here, apparently this is done by something called image recognition. Apparently you can just scan the image and it will do it for you. Okay, cool technology. It also looks a bit nicer than having a QR code all over your tiles. Now, the app wasn't in the stage where the scanning technology was working yet, but you can do it manually, and we did it manually. So whichever way works for you, you can do it. But the cool thing is that when you go to these locations, when you get the tiles back in a future game, you're able to scan the location, visit it, and then more story can happen. And you can get more points, some cool item, or just develop the story in a particular way. It's cool because suddenly the tile that you may have looked at and thought, it's just mountain and a sacred place, fine, I'm not that fussed about it. Suddenly it's now got a location sticker on it, and you're like, I probably should get that symbol over there, but I want to go visit that little location. Maybe I'll grab that tile just so that I can have some fun with the story. And that's really cool. And that's essentially what the gameplay is like. Most of it is chuck dice, choose the map tiles you want, re-roll your dice when you need to rest, and go at it again. But from scenario 2, certainly, the options of what you can do with the dice open up. So as well as grabbing map tiles, you'll be able to go visit this forge, go visit this workshop, go do this. I'm not trying to spoil too much here. And as you go through these, you'll even manage to grab artifacts that you stick on your little box here as a reminder of, I've got the Scepter of Magic Brilliance or whatever, I'm just making up names here. You can also get titles for the box. My friend managed to get quite a few on here, and there'll be stuff like, the Unleasher of the Horde or something. You don't know what these titles mean until future campaign games, but at the moment you've got it and you're like, ooh, this could develop into something nice later. And so that's kind of it. It's a very simple game. In terms of scoring at the end of a scenario to see who won, technically, there isn't technically a winner of a scenario. It's more of what's your current standing. So by the end of the scenario, you've maybe fulfilled some of the quests, or you've managed to get like big regions. You're trying to get like either a lot of different regions, like a lot of different mountains, or you're trying to get like the biggest lake, the biggest plains, that kind of thing. You can it rewards you for big areas and lots of little areas. You won't be able to do both, and that's one great thing here, it'll give you a lot of options of where you can get potential standing like honor points from, but you won't be able to do them all, so you're going to kind of pick your battles, pick which path you feel like going, whether it's from a mechanical perspective or maybe you just want to do it from a thematic perspective. When I played through this, I essentially was quite heavy on siding with the barbarians, like remaining quite neutral, but I was really on Mother Gaia's side. So I was really like, no, protect the Earth, gotta protect the Earth, because all this is gonna happen, but we gotta respect the planet and stuff. Whereas I had no caring about anything to do with the Vikings or Norse or anything. It was just like, look, we gotta push these away. But then the wars happen, and then depending on what other players have done with the other factions, the battles may be won or lost in different ways, because you might just not have got enough icons that they did. I don't know if it affects your winning the campaign or not, but it certainly is developing the story. So this does have the potential for a good amount of replay value. So that's kind of it from a gameplay perspective. As I said, the rules were pretty easy to get into, and we didn't have too much trouble with them. The components are pretty decent even from a prototype standpoint, and the app seemed to work pretty well, even though it didn't have the scanning technology on it. Even just using it manually, it worked. There's no voice acting, which was a little bit of a shame, but to be honest, do you know how expensive voice actors are? It would be quite a lot of money for them to get voice acting for the entire app, but maybe they can do it as a stretch goal. That would be a useful stretch goal. Forget minis that are stupidly tiny like in Destinies. No, how about a voice actor? Paid voice actor for the app. That'd be a stretch goal I'd go for. But it seems to work pretty well, and it flowed nicely. Now, I played this as a 3-player game. I played this with 2 friends of mine, and unfortunately, our 4th player couldn't make it, and they both enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed this not as much as they did, but I still enjoyed it. It was a case that by the end of the first game, we were like, okay, that was simple, it was nice, it didn't burn my brain or anything, but there's got to be more to it than that, surely. And then as scenario 2 happened, it's like, wow, a lot of stuff is happening already, and then by the end of scenario 2, we're like, I'd like to see what happens next. And that's kind of what you want to get from a legacy story-driven game. It's not like it blew me away in terms of, oh my god, these are like revolutionary new mechanics. They're not. We've seen this kind of stuff before, but it's light. It's easy, and yet it gives you that legacy feel of like, oh, I get to unlock this new stuff. I get to be part of the plot. I'm now this title. What will that mean in the future? I'm like really good with Gaia. Is that going to develop into something else? It's simpler, I would dare say, than Pandemic Legacy, like Season 1. And that wasn't exactly a complex game, but much in the same fashion of put a rulebook sticker here and put a sticker on this tile, put a sticker on this bit. It functions pretty much the same, but this is a more interesting story than Pandemic Legacy, I would say, and it's simpler in its rule set than Pandemic Legacy. So I have no doubt that this could work with, families and that. The idea of customizing your dice is really good fun. I always like doing that. And obviously grabbing stickers for tiles and trying to get those tiles in later scenarios is going to be good fun. And I reckon it's going to be a good hit with a lot of people. Now, the competitive side works better in this, I think, than it does in Destinies, because I reviewed Destinies and I wasn't the biggest fan. I thought it was fine, but I didn't think the competitive thing worked in that. It was too luck driven as to whether you got what you needed or not. Here I think it works better because everybody's getting something. You're getting some part of the story. I'm really good with this, but I'm bad with this. Another player is really good with that, but bad with this. You still feel like you're contributing, you're doing okay, and it's not just a straight win-loser scenario. It's just a case of, right, you got this many points, this is the current standing, start the next scenario. It doesn't even tell you who won or lost. You don't even know if you being higher with a particular deity means that you're winning or not. It's like, okay, well, we'll find out later. That just makes people feel a little bit better. So the rules that we mentioned that were a little bit iffy, and there was one aspect that I did want to go over briefly, was there's no rule in the game for what happens when you can't take a tile. And this was a flaw we came across. A friend of ours tried to rush the second scenario by going for the whole map very quickly because there were other distractions that the other two of us were going after. So he thought, well, if I go for the map, I can get all the icons, like dictate what happens in this war, and I'm going to go with that. And that seemed like a legit strategy. Until you get to your last couple of tiles you've got to fill in, and no tile is out on the board that fits, because the terrain has to match. So despite this legit decent idea, we caught him up really easily. So by the end of the game, each of us was searching for 1 or 2 tiles left, which was a bit unfair, I think, on his part, because he could have easily rushed the game had that not happened. So, and then there's no rule in the book for saying, well, what happens when you can't find a tile easily? In fact, there's no rule for stalemate. If all 3 players are in a situation where nothing on the board works for them, then there's no rule to say that you auto-finish the game or you scrap the board or anything. They're going to have to work on that. but I think they need a rule where, because you normally like choose when you want to rest with the dice, they should be able to say, right, if you've got all your dice ready, you forfeit your entire turn, so use up every single one of your dice, but you get to look through the stack, basically flip the tiles over until you get one that fits. So you can't choose what's on the tile, that's your negative side, but at least it will fit. You can complete the map and end the game if that was your intention. That, I think, would work quite well. You know, you're having to forfeit an entire row of dice in order to do that, and you don't know what you're going to get. So you would love to get a tile that's got 3 icons on it, but you have no idea because it's random from the deck. But at least you're getting something. You're not left in the position that he was in, where for 4 or 5 turns in a row, nothing fit, and we just casually caught up while his turn was just like, can't do anything, I'll just rest. Can't do anything, I'll just rest. Can't do anything, I'll just rest.
Well, that was pointless.
You know, that was a little bit sucky for him, but it wasn't enough to completely destroy the game. I just think you're going to need a rule in there somewhere, Lucky Duck. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed my time with this. You know, we took a few notes, and you know, the FAQ was good, the app was good. I mean, I'm intrigued by this. I'm not blown away. This isn't something that I'm saying is like, oh my god, it's the best thing ever. Oh my god, yes, I must play this again. It's like not quite that level, but I think this is better than Destinies. Destinies I gave a 6 out of 10. I thought it was decent, but you know, it was lacking in a few areas. This one is definitely a prototype stage worth a seal of endorsement at least, you know, and I'm definitely intrigued to see what happens next. In fact, because we enjoyed it as a group, and we know our 4th friend would enjoy this as well, we're keen to think, all right, well, when the Kickstarter comes out, we're probably going to go 4 ways on a decent, like, blinged out deluxe copy of it and have our own one for the group. And you can do the same. If you have a group that you're going to play this with, share the cost between all 4 of you, and then suddenly you've got a very cheap Kickstarter game that you can play. So, yeah, it did the job nicely, I think. You know, it's got an interesting story with it. It's got, you know, really good legacy aspects, which I'm sure will develop over the 12 scenarios. I mean, this is literally talking from 2 scenarios, where the first scenario kind of sucks. Not gonna lie, it kind of sucks. You know, maybe they can put some more content in there, but it teaches you what you're doing pretty easily. And then from the second scenario, it then goes, right, okay, were you complaining about that there wasn't enough in the scenario? Well, here you go. Boom. It just chucks the whole like kitchen sink at you, which is great, which is fair enough. You just gotta be prepared for that. But yeah, Divinus has done a pretty good job in impressing us so far. You know, I'm keen to look at what the Kickstarter has to say. I'll put a link in the description so that you can follow it as well and be ready for when it launches. But yeah, it'll be cool to see where this goes and develops, you know. But so far, from a prototype stage and 2 scenarios, we're keen to see more. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video. Don't forget that this channel is sponsored by Zatu.co.uk. If you like anything else by Lucky Duck Games, then consider looking on Zatu to see if you can save yourself 5% discount on the basket of games. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up on the video if you like this content. It means the world to me to know that you appreciate it. And of course, if you want to check out other content that I've made from Lucky Duck Games, if you want to check out my Destinies review, you can check out that one that I did recently, or perhaps The Court of Miracles, another underrated title that you can check out as well. Take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.